A human took in 3 alien sisters and changed their fate forever. The night was silent on the edge of the colony road. Broken lights flickered on the corners of old buildings, and the air smelled of dust and cold metal. A traveler walked there, a human man carrying nothing but a bag and the weight of his own quiet life. He was not a soldier anymore, not a leader, not even someone that others remembered. He lived far away from war, from politics, from voices that told him what to do. But on that night, when the stars were low and the streets almost empty, his path crossed with 3 sisters who were not from his world. They stood in the shadows of a closed shop. Their eyes followed every sound, every flicker of light, as if danger lived in every corner. Their clothes were torn, their bodies thin, their steps unsteady. They were young, yet their faces carried the silence of survivors. They had run for days, maybe weeks, carrying nothing with them except each other. Blue skin, green skin, and the faint glow of violet under the dim light marked them as outsiders. They did not belong here. They did not belong anywhere. The human stopped. At first he thought they might be thieves or strays. But when he looked closer, he saw something else. Hunger, fear, exhaustion that pressed into their bones. The sisters had nothing left. Their home was gone. Their people were gone. And still they stood there together, holding on to the only thing that had not been stolen from them: family. For a moment, no one spoke. The wind touched the broken signs above them, making them creak as if the town itself wanted to warn him. People said aliens brought trouble. People said they carried danger with them. He remembered those warnings. He remembered the words whispered in bars, in markets, in lonely corners of the colony. Do not trust the ones who come from broken worlds. Their enemies follow them. Their curses follow them. The sisters seemed to know that truth too. They did not beg. They did not move forward. They only stood there waiting for him to pass by, waiting for another door to close in their faces. They were already used to it, but the human did not walk away. He looked at them and he saw not strangers, not threats, but 3 young souls who had lost everything. Something stirred inside him. He remembered hunger. He remembered sleeping on cold ground, the fear of footsteps in the dark. He remembered what it was like to have nothing. He stepped closer. The sisters tensed, their hands pulling together as if one could protect the other 2. Their eyes flashed in the dim light, hard and ready, even though their bodies were weak. He raised his hand slowly, showing he carried no weapon. His voice was quiet, steady. You look tired, he said. You look cold. My place is not far. I have food. I have a fire. If you want shelter, you can come. The words fell heavy in the air. The sisters did not answer at once. Trust was not easy for them. Every time they had trusted, someone had taken more from them. Their home, their parents, their future. Why should this man be different? He was only one human in a universe that had already shown its cruelty. Still, the oldest sister studied his face. There was no greed in his eyes, no trick, no hunger for reward, only calm, only tired honesty. For the first time in many days, she felt the sharp edge of fear soften. Not vanish, but weaken. She gave a slow nod, almost invisible, and the other 2 followed. The man turned, walking ahead, letting them choose whether to follow or not. His boots pressed against the dust. Behind him, he heard the faint steps of 3 sisters moving closer. Their shadows stretched across the broken street, crossing into a road that would bind their fates together. When they reached his home, it was small, built from stone and wood, hidden under old trees. It was not much. A single room, a kitchen, a fire that still burned weakly in the corner. But to the sisters, it was a fortress compared to the endless cold outside. They stood near the door, unsure whether to enter. He stepped aside. It is warm inside, he said. One by one, they stepped through. For the first time since their world had fallen, the sisters breathed without running. They did not know if this human was a savior or a fool. They did not know if this choice would bring safety or another kind of ruin. But the door closed behind them, shutting out the cold night, and in that moment something began. The human gave them bread, though it was simple and dry. He gave them water, though it was plain and warm. Yet when they ate, it felt like the richest meal they had ever known. Their hands shook as they held the food, not from weakness alone, but from the shock of being treated as living beings again. He did not ask them who they were. He did not ask where they came from. He only said, "You can rest here tonight." The sisters lay on the floor near the fire. Their eyes stayed open long after their bodies begged for sleep, watching the man as if one wrong move would send them running again. But he sat quietly, cleaning old tools, humming a song too soft to hear. No threats, no traps, only peace. And as the flames flickered across the small room, the sisters began to close their eyes. For the first time in what felt like years, they dreamed without fear. What none of them knew was this: the choice made that night would not only change their lives, it would echo far beyond the walls of that small home. The universe had already turned its gaze toward them. Trouble was coming. Enemies were waiting. But for now, inside that quiet house, 3 alien sisters had shelter, and a human had unknowingly stepped into a story greater than his own. The human's choice morning light touched the windows of the small house. The fire had burned low, leaving only soft ashes that gave a faint warmth to the room. The sisters stirred slowly, their bodies weak but a little stronger than the night before. For a moment, they almost forgot where they were. Then they saw the human sitting at the table, quiet, his back turned, and the memory returned. They were not at home. Their world was still gone. But they were safe, at least for now. The man placed bread on the table. It was plain, hard at the edges, but it was food. The smell filled the air, reminding the sisters of mornings long past before their home was destroyed. They looked at the bread, then at him, unsure if this kindness came with a cost. He pushed the plate toward them and spoke with the same calm voice as the night before. "Eat. You need strength." The youngest sister hesitated. Her fingers trembled as she reached for a piece. She bit into it quickly, afraid it might be taken away. The middle sister followed, her eyes never leaving the man's hands. The oldest waited the longest. She studied his face for any sign of deceit. But he did not look at them with hunger or suspicion. He simply ate his own piece in silence. At last she took hers. Outside, the colony town had already begun to wake. Shops opened their doors, traders shouted in the streets, and workers marched to the fields. News traveled fast in small places, and the whispers had already begun. A stranger had taken in aliens. 3 of them. Some said it was foolish. Some said it was dangerous. In a world where survival was already hard, no one wanted new mouths to feed, especially ones with foreign faces and strange colors. By noon, the human heard a knock at his door. A neighbor stood there, his arms crossed, his eyes sharp. He was not angry, but his voice carried warning. "I heard what you did," the man said. "You should think twice. They will bring trouble. People are already talking. If soldiers hear about this, if patrols find out, you will pay the price. Do not forget they are not like us." The human listened. He said nothing at first. The words echoed in his mind because they were not new. He had heard them before, years ago when he was a soldier in the war. People had spoken the same way about refugees, about strangers, about anyone who looked different. And he had seen what happened when no one helped them. He had seen fields full of bodies. He had seen families destroyed by fear and silence. "They are only children," the human said at last. His voice was quiet, but it carried weight. The neighbor frowned. "Children or not, danger follows their kind. Do not risk your life for them. One mistake will bring soldiers to your door." The human closed the door gently. His heart was heavy, but his mind was steady. He had made his choice. Whatever danger would come, he would not send the sisters away. Inside, the sisters had heard everything. Their eyes were lowered, shame pressing on them like chains. They did not want to cause him trouble. They did not want to be a burden. But before they could speak, he looked at them and said only one thing: "You are safe here." Those words were strange to them. They had not heard them since their home was destroyed. They wanted to believe, but belief was dangerous. Trust had already cost them too much. Still, something in his voice cut through their fear. It was not the voice of someone who lied. Days passed, and the sisters began to live under his roof. They worked beside him, not because he asked, but because they wished to repay him. The youngest gathered wood for the fire. The middle sister cleaned and repaired tools. The oldest stood guard at night, her sharp eyes watching the road though her body was weary. In return, he taught them simple things: how to cook with the little food he had, how to fix broken walls, how to plant seeds in the soil. These were small acts, but to the sisters they were reminders of life before the ruin. With each passing day, the walls of their fear began to crack. Yet whispers outside grew louder. Some villagers avoided the human when he passed. Others spat near his boots. The word traitor floated in the air, though no one said it to his face. The sisters noticed, and guilt burned inside them. They asked him more than once, "Why do you help us? Why do you risk yourself for us?" He never gave a grand answer. He only said, "Because someone must." It was not heroism that guided him. It was memory. He remembered the cold nights when he too had been hungry, the days when no hand reached out to help him. He remembered what it felt like to be left behind. That memory shaped his choice more than fear of soldiers, more than the weight of whispers. One evening, as the sun sank and painted the sky in gold, the sisters sat outside with him. The youngest laughed softly at something he said. Her laughter was thin, unused, but real. The sound startled even her sisters, who had not heard her laugh since before their home was taken. For a brief moment the world seemed lighter, but far above in the dark sky ships moved. They were distant, silent shadows gliding between stars unseen by most. The sisters did not notice them yet. The human did not look up. But the truth was clear. Their past had not vanished. Their enemies had not forgotten. The safety they found here was fragile, and the choice the human made was only the beginning of something greater. The bond grows. The days that followed passed quietly. The sisters remained in the small house, each day a little less fearful than the one before. Their bodies healed with food and rest, but something deeper began to change too. The human's kindness was not loud, not filled with promises or grand speeches. It was in the way he placed extra bread on the table without a word. It was in the way he let the fire burn longer at night so they could sleep warmly. It was in the way he treated them not as strangers, but as people who belonged under his roof. The youngest sister was the first to laugh. It was a thin sound, fragile, almost uncertain, as if she had forgotten how. She laughed when the human burned the bread in the oven and cursed softly at the smoke. The sound startled her own ears. Her sisters turned toward her in silence, their eyes wide as if they were hearing a ghost. Then slowly the human smiled. The youngest pressed her hand over her mouth as if laughter was dangerous, but she could not hold it back. From that day a small light began to grow between them. The middle sister started to help in the garden. She had no skill with soil, yet she watched carefully as the human showed her how to press seeds into the earth. She followed his movements with patience, her violet hands touching the dirt as though it might break. When the first small green shoots pushed through days later, her eyes filled with something she thought she had lost forever: hope. The oldest sister still carried caution in her heart. She slept lightly, always near the door, her hand resting on a sharp piece of broken metal she had carried since the fall of their home. She trusted no one fully, not even the human who had saved them. Yet even she could not ignore the quiet strength in his choices. He never asked them for anything. He never spoke of debt. Each evening when he set the fire and placed their meals before them, she felt the iron chains of suspicion weaken. At night, when the sisters whispered among themselves, they spoke not only of fear, but of memory. They remembered their mother's songs, their father's stories, the smell of their old world's forests. For the first time in many months, their voices carried not only sorrow but fragments of what they had been. The human sometimes listened, though he did not understand their language. He did not need to. The sound of their whispers was enough to remind him why he had chosen to protect them, but the outside world had not forgotten them. Rumors continued to spread. Some villagers crossed the street when they saw the human coming. Others spat words under their breath: traitor, fool, risk. Children pointed at the sisters when they walked past the edges of the town. The sisters felt those stares sharp as knives, and guilt gnawed at them. They asked the human once more, "Why do you let us stay? Why not send us away before trouble comes?" He looked at them with tired eyes and answered with the same quiet truth: "Because you deserve a place to rest." It was a simple answer, but to the sisters, it carried more weight than any promise. No one had ever spoken to them that way since the day their world was destroyed. No one had looked at them and seen more than wandering survivors. In his words, they found not just shelter, but a reason to believe they were still worth saving. The bond deepened in silence. The sisters began to share small pieces of themselves. The youngest showed him how her people once braided threads into patterns of memory. The middle one sang a song softly one night by the fire, her voice shaking but steadying with each note. Even the oldest, who trusted no one, placed her broken blade on the table one morning and let her hand rest free, as if she was learning little by little to set her guard down. Yet the shadows in the sky grew closer. Distant ships sometimes glimmered like falling stars. The sisters knew what they were. Their enemies did not forgive. Their enemies did not stop. Each night when the human closed his door, danger drew a little nearer. The bond they built was fragile, like glass warmed by fire. It could break with one strike from the outside, but for now inside that house it held. The sisters were no longer only survivors. The human was no longer only a loner. Together they were something new, a family formed not by blood but by choice. And far beyond the quiet fields, forces waited to test that choice. The threat returns. The sky was quiet the evening it began. The sisters were sitting by the fire, their voices soft as they shared stories of their old world. The human was outside fixing a broken fence post in the fading light. Nothing seemed different, yet far above in the cold stretch of stars something moved. Silent ships drifted closer, their dark frames blending with the night sky. They were hunters and they had come searching. The sisters sensed it before they saw it. A sudden chill touched their skin, a tremor in their hearts. The oldest sister stiffened, her eyes narrowing toward the horizon. She had known this feeling too many times before. Enemies were near, she stepped outside. The human looked at her, noticing the sharpness in her expression. He did not ask questions. He followed her gaze, but the sky showed only a faint scatter of stars. Still, her face was enough. "They have found us," she whispered. The words struck the air heavy. The middle sister clutched her hands together. The youngest voice shook. "We cannot stay. We must run again." The human did not move. His hands tightened around the tool he was holding, his jaw firm. "No," he said simply. "This is your home now. If they want you, they will have to come through me." The sisters stared at him, stunned. His voice was steady, but his body was only one. He had no armies, no weapons beyond the simple tools of a farmer. Against ships that crossed the stars, what could he do? Yet the way he stood made something stir inside them. He was not speaking from pride. He was speaking from truth. The night grew darker. Lights flashed in the distance, faint but growing closer. The sound of engines rolled through the air like thunder. Villagers ran to their doors, whispering in fear. Some pointed toward the human's house, their voices sharp with accusation. "It is because of them. They brought this here." Knocks rattled the human's door. Men from the town stood outside, their faces pale but their words fierce. "Give them up," one demanded. "If you hand over the sisters, they will leave us alone. Do not bring war to our doorstep." The human opened the door and looked at them calmly. His answer was as steady as stone. "They stay here," the men shouted, their anger rising. Some cursed him as a traitor. Others pleaded with him, begging him not to risk all their lives. But he did not bend. He closed the door, leaving the noise outside. Inside, the sisters stood together, their fear heavy. The youngest whispered, "You will die because of us." The human looked at her, his eyes softer now. "No," he said. "I will live because of you. For too long I had no reason. Now I do." The words cut through their fear like a blade. For the first time they understood. This man was not only saving them. They were saving him too. Moments later, the roar of engines shook the ground. Shadows fell across the fields as ships descended. Their metal frames glowed red in the dark, light scanning the land like the eyes of predators. Soldiers poured out, armored and armed, their steps echoing against the soil. They marched straight toward the small house. The sisters trembled. They had seen these soldiers before. They remembered the fire of their weapons, the destruction of their home. Their bodies screamed to run, to hide, to disappear. But when they looked at the human standing in the doorway, they saw no fear in him. Only resolve. He stepped forward, his voice carrying across the field. "If you want them," he said, his tone unshaken, "you will have to go through me." The soldiers laughed at first. One raised his weapon, the light glinting off its edge. But then something strange happened. The villagers who had cursed him only moments ago watched from their doors. They saw him standing there, one man against an army, protecting 3 alien sisters with nothing but his will, and in that moment even they felt something stir. The soldiers hesitated. It was not the power of his body that stopped them. It was the power of his defiance. He was only human, yet he stood as if he carried more than himself. He carried the weight of choice, the weight of courage. The oldest sister stepped beside him. Her broken blade was small, but her eyes burned. The middle sister followed, her hands trembling but steadying as she lifted a tool from the table. The youngest stood too, her voice whispering words of strength she barely remembered. They did not stand behind him now. They stood with him. The soldiers raised their weapons again. The night hung heavy, silence pressing over the land. The sisters' hearts pounded. The villagers held their breath, and the human did not move. His voice cut through the dark once more, sharp as fire. This is not your world, and they are not yours to take. The next moment would decide everything. A new fate. The night hung still. The soldiers' weapons raised, the villagers frozen in silence, and the small house standing like a fragile wall between survival and ruin. 3 alien sisters stood beside the human, their fear heavy but their resolve stronger than it had ever been. For the first time since their world was destroyed, they did not stand alone. The commander of the soldiers stepped forward. His armor glowed faint red under the lights of the ship. His voice was sharp, carrying the weight of command. Step aside, human. They belong to us. They are fugitives, property of the Empire. If you protect them, you will die with them. The human's reply was calm, but his words struck like stone. They are not property. They are people. If you want them, you must go through me. The soldiers tightened their grip. A single command and the ground would burn. The villagers trembled, waiting for blood to fall. Yet the commander hesitated. He saw not an army in front of him, not weapons, not power. He saw one human, broken and scarred, but standing unshaken. And behind him, 3 sisters who refused to kneel any longer. The pause was long, stretched thin like a wire ready to snap. The sisters felt it too, the weight of a choice. They could run and leave him to his death. They could hide as they had always done. But for the first time, they did not choose escape. They stepped closer to him, their shoulders touching his. Their eyes met his, and without words a vow was formed. Together. The commander's eyes narrowed. He gave a sharp signal with his hand. Soldiers moved forward, their boots heavy against the earth. The villagers gasped, doors slammed, fear filling the air like smoke. But before the soldiers could strike, the human spoke again, his voice carrying across the fields. You are not welcome here. This is my home. These are my people now, and if you cross this door you will face not just me but all of us. It was madness. One man against a squad of trained soldiers. Yet madness has power when courage burns bright enough. The sisters lifted their broken tools and blades, small and weak compared to the soldiers' rifles, but glowing with defiance. Their stance was enough to shake even hardened fighters. The soldiers stopped. Not because of the weapons, but because of the fire in their eyes. They had seen many battles, many enemies, but rarely had they seen survivors who refused to bend, even when the stars themselves turned against them. The commander's face hardened. His voice dropped low, almost a growl. This is not finished. You cannot protect them forever. The Empire remembers, and it will return. With a final signal, the soldiers pulled back. Engines roared. Shadows lifted from the ground, and the ships rose into the night sky. The sound faded into distance, leaving only silence and the pounding of hearts. The villagers stepped out slowly, their faces pale, their voices hushed. They had expected death, fire, and ruin. Instead, they had witnessed something they could not explain. One human standing against power and surviving. Their whispers changed, no longer only traitor or fool. Now some whispered another word. Respect. Inside the house, the sisters sat by the fire once more. Their bodies trembled, not from weakness but from the weight of what had passed. The youngest looked at the human with wide eyes. You did not have to do that, she whispered. Yes? The oldest added, her voice low. You risked everything. The human placed more wood on the fire. The flames rose higher, pushing back the dark. His answer was simple. The same truth he had spoken since the night they arrived. No one should be left with nothing. The sisters fell silent. In those words, they heard more than kindness. They heard the promise of a future. For the first time, their lives were not only about running, not only about surviving, they were about belonging. Days later, the village still carried the memory of that night. Some still whispered in fear, but others looked at the sisters with different eyes. Not as outsiders, not as trouble, but as people worth protecting. The human's choice had begun to change more than his own fate. It had begun to change theirs too. The sisters worked beside him in the fields, their laughter no longer strange, their voices no longer whispers of sorrow. The youngest sang as she carried water. The middle one tended the garden with steady hands. The oldest, though still cautious, no longer slept with her blade clutched in her fist. She laid it aside, at least for the night. Their world was gone. Their people were lost. But they were no longer nothing. They had found a place where they mattered. They had found a man who gave them shelter, and in return they gave him back something he had lost long ago: purpose. On quiet evenings, the humans sat outside with them, watching the stars. The sisters no longer feared the sky. They looked at it with new eyes, not as a grave of their past, but as a horizon waiting for them. The Empire would return one day, they knew. But when it did, they would not face it as broken survivors. They would face it as a family. And so, under the endless night, a new fate was written. 3 alien sisters who had lost everything and 1 human who had nothing left now stood together. Not by chance, not by accident, but by choice. And that choice changed everything.